The external vertebral venous plexuses, best marked in the cervical region, consist of anterior and posterior plexuses, which anastomose freely with each other. The anterior external plexuses lie in front of the bodies of the vertebrae, communicate with the basovertebral and intervertebral veins, and receive tributaries from the vertebral bodies. The posterior external plexuses are placed partly on the posterior surfaces of the vertebral arches and their processes, and partly between the deep dorsal muscles. They are best developed in the cervical region, and there anastomose with the vertebral, occipital, and deep cervical veins. The internal vertebral venous plexuses lie within the vertebral canal between the dura mater and the vertebrae, and receive tributaries from the bones and from the medulla spinalis. They form a closer network than the external plexuses, and, running mainly in a vertical direction, form 4 longitudinal veins, 2 in front and 2 behind. They therefore may be divided into anterior and posterior groups. The anterior internal plexuses consist of large veins which lie on the posterior surfaces of the vertebral bodies and intervertebral fibrocartilages on either side of the posterior longitudinal ligament. The anterior internal plexuses consist of large veins which lie on the posterior surfaces of the vertebral bodies and intervertebral fibrocartilages on either side of the posterior longitudinal ligament. Under cover of this ligament, they are connected by transverse branches into which the basovertebral veins open. The posterior internal plexuses are placed, one on either side of the middle line, in front of the vertebral arches and ligamenta flava, and anastomose by veins passing through those ligaments with the posterior external plexuses. The anterior and posterior plexuses communicate freely with one another by a series of venous rings, one opposite each vertebra. Around the foramen magnum, they form an intricate network which opens into the vertebral veins, and is connected above with the occipital sinus, the basilar plexus, the condyloid emissary vein, and the rete canalis hypoglossi. The basovertebral veins emerge from the foramina on the posterior surfaces of the vertebral bodies. They are contained in large, tortuous channels in the substance of the bones, similar in every respect to those found in the diplo of the cranial bones. They communicate through small openings on the front and sides of the bodies of the vertebrae with the anterior external vertebral plexuses, and converge behind to the principal canal, which is sometimes double toward its posterior part, and open by valved orifices into the transverse branches, which unite the anterior internal vertebral plexuses. They become greatly enlarged in advanced age. The intervertebral veins accompany the spinal nerves through the intervertebral foramina. They receive the veins from the medulla spinalis, drain the internal and external vertebral plexuses, and end in the vertebral, intercostal, lumbar, and lateral sacral veins, their orifices being provided with valves. The veins of the medulla spinalis are situated in the pia mater and form a minute tortuous venous plexus. They emerge chiefly from the median fissures of the medulla spinalis and are largest in the lumbar region. In this plexus there are 2 median longitudinal veins, one in front of the anterior fissure and the other behind the posterior sulcus of the cord, and 4 lateral longitudinal veins which run behind the nerve roots. They end in the intervertebral veins. Near the base of the skull they unite, and form 2 or 3 small trunks, which communicate with the vertebral veins, and then end in the inferior cerebellar veins, or in the inferior petrosal sinuses. End of section 39. Recording by Eric Hale.